A new bill to overhaul the regulatory framework of higher education in India. The Viksit Bharat Shiksha Adhishthan bill was introduced in the parliament by Union Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan to understand the implications of replacing the UGC, the AICTE and the NCTE with a single regulator. We're being joined by Professor Jagdish Kumar, the former chairman of UGC. Thank you for speaking to NDTV, Professor. Professor, first off, in simple terms, what does the bill seek to change and why is the government replacing these bodies now?
To understand the VBSA bill and the reason why it is being introduced now, we need to look at the bigger picture. Our Indian higher education is a vast domain, and we have close to 1,200 universities and more than 50,000 colleges. Now, we have primarily three kinds of institutions. One is the institutions of national importance, such as IITs, NITs. And then you have the central institutions, such as the central universities which are established through an act of parliament, or institutions which are established by a notification of the Ministry of Education. Currently, we call them deemed to be universities. And then you have the third category of universities, which are the state universities. These are established through an act of the state assembly, and you have both private universities and state-funded universities. Now, the reason why we are bringing this VBSA bill the government has introduced is that there are multiple regulators in higher education. For example, we have about 4.5 crore students in higher education, and 90% of them, nearly 90% of them, are regulated by four regulators: University Grants Commission, AICTE for technical education, NCTE for teacher education, and then you also have Council of Architecture. So now, during last several years, what we have observed is that although a lot of reforms of NEP 2020 are being rolled out and the institutions are implementing, when it comes to the regulatory domain, our institutions are finding it very hard because many of our universities are comprehensive universities, meaning that they offer general programs such as BSc, BA, BCom. They also offer engineering programs. They offer teacher training programs. They offer architecture programs. Now, a single university has to go to multiple regulators, submit multiple application forms, and get these approvals. A lot of paperwork, delays, and also these regulators have overlapping jurisdictions, and then there are conflicting regulations and guidelines. To overcome all these, the challenges that our institutions are facing, for the first time, in the draft National Education Policy released in 2019, the idea of a unified single apex body for regulating higher education in India was proposed. And after year-long discussions of NEP draft, finally in NEP 2020, this idea of a single regulator was introduced. So therefore, the VBSA 2025 bill introduction is not an afterthought or an overnight kind of thing. A lot of groundwork and discussions have taken place. Now, NEP 2020 says that we need to completely transform the regulatory system. What does it mean? Why do we want to actually regulate? The primary reason why we want to regulate is to protect the student interests and to make sure that the institutions offer quality outcome-based education. And three, to ensure that the institutions remain accountable to the stakeholders. The stakeholders are the students, their parents, the employers, and the society to a larger extent. That's the reason why we want to regulate. So NEP 2020 therefore said, whatever regulation we want to bring, it has to be light but tight, and also it should be rooted in Indian context and it should be futuristic. Now, Yeah.
You bring about this light but tight. This is something that Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan also recently said, and you also brought about the point of duplication. So, how will this particular framework reduce duplication in bureaucratic work, especially in terms of data, paperwork? How will that happen, and how will that also happen across regulators? I mean, now it'll be one regulator, but up until now, it's been three regulators.
Right. Um, Light but tight. Light means simpler regulations, less bureaucratic work, and more autonomy for well performing institutions so that they can become self governing institutions. Tight means focus on integrity, quality of education, transparency, and accountability. That is the meaning of light but tight regulation. Now, I'll give you one example. Uh, uh, let's say in a university, there is a school of engineering. And then the same university also affiliates some 100 private engineering colleges. Now, AICTE has a regulation for the minimum qualifications for the appointment of faculty in their domain, which is private engineering colleges. But UGC gives its regulations on minimum qualifications for appointment of faculty for the university system. That means the engineering faculty in the College of Engineering of the university have to follow one regulation, and the engineering faculty in the affiliated colleges of the same university have to follow another regulation. So it creates a lot of confusion and conflict. So when you bring this new structure, Viksit Bharat Shiksha Adhishthan, it is an apex body with a chairman who is an honorary chairman with 12 members. And then there are three verticals in this VBSA. You have the regulatory vertical, you have the accreditation vertical, and the standard setting vertical. Now, regulatory vertical. Currently, the regulation is done by all the four organizations, UGC, AICTE, NCTE, and COA. And as I said, they are either overlapping or they are conflicting. Now, all the regulatory activities of these four bodies will be brought under one regulatory vertical, so that now you can have much more harmonized, simple regulations applicable across the domains, so that there is no confusion at all. So similarly, in the case of accreditation, you have the NAC, you have the National Assessment and Accreditation Council, which is an inter-university center of UGC. And then you have NBA, and also you have the ranking organization, NIRF. So in the new scheme, all those bodies will come under one vertical, accreditation vertical. And this accreditation council will also build an ecosystem in our country to create accreditation ecosystem in our country. And similarly, the Standards Council. The Standard Council is extremely important because we need to provide flexibility and freedom to our students to adopt multidisciplinary education. Today, if a student who is studying physics also wants to study economics, or a student who is doing engineering also wants to minor in philosophy, or a commerce student wants to do data science. Now, because there are no common standards, it becomes very difficult for the students. So the Standard Council will establish harmonized common standards across the disciplines, so that the students can move from one discipline to the other discipline, can move from one institution to the other institution, or can move from one university, study in one university for 2 years, but then go to another university for various reasons to complete the rest of the 2 years. So once these common national standards are established, the student mobility will be much easier for them. So by separating these individual councils and their responsibilities, the conflict of interest among them will be completely eliminated. And that's the reason why these three verticals are created under this apex body. And this apex body is a coordinating body, whereas the three verticals are the executing bodies.
Right. Professor, another flashpoint that has been in much debate and discussion is funding. So, up until now, the framework has been that the center disperses these funds to the UGC and then the UGC gives it across to or grants it to the central universities, right? With the VBSA, this changes with the center dominating or rather directly dispersing these funds to the central universities now, right? So now, how does this affect or change institutional autonomy is a question that a lot of educationists and institutions are also concerned about at this point.
You see, let me give you the bigger picture. I said we have about more than 1,200 higher educational institutions. Out of that, the central universities are about 45 or 47 with Ministry of Education. There are some more central universities with other ministries. And then we have slightly over 150 INIs, institutions of national importance. Whether in the earlier model or in the new model, for all more than 150 INIs, MOE will continue to give funding. And what is this funding required for? For salaries, pension, maintenance, infrastructure, and so on. So there is no change in that system. And we have about 45 to 47 central universities with the Ministry of Education. And earlier what used to happen, the MOE used to transfer the funds to UGC and then UGC used to send it to the universities. Now the middle path is removed. It's a straight path from the Ministry of Education. Directly it will go to the central universities, and the ministry also has said that this fund dispersal they will design a dispersal mode which will be better than what is now, what is currently. So the ministry will give. And now you have the other set of institutions, 540 private universities, which manage on their own. And then you have about 514 state-established, state-funded universities. And the funding is given by the respective state governments. Either in the previous system or in the new system, the state governments will continue to directly fund their own state universities. So therefore, there is only a minor change. The Ministry of Education, instead of sending it to the regulator, it will directly send it to the central universities. So therefore, there is not much change. But let me add one more thing. Funding is also required, not just only for the establishment charges. Funding is required for research, to purchase the new state-of-the-art equipment, to establish research infrastructure in the educational institutions. Now you have a separate vertical in the government, which is Anusandhan National Research Foundation. Now, if you see the objectives of the ANRF, it doesn't distinguish between private or public universities. And the funding for research is given based on competitive project proposals, competitive evaluation. So therefore, those universities which are doing good, they can compete for this funding and then get the funding from ANRF.
Yeah. But Professor, doesn't this bring into context the whole debate about central surveillance? And because center will now directly be dispersing these funds, and okay, that does solve a lot of basically the middle person thing gets sorted out, right? But this is what states are also concerned about center surveillance. And where does this also leave states in terms of their representation within this new framework?
Okay. If you look at the structure of the membership in each of these three councils, you will have state government representatives, and union representation, union territory representation. You will have representation from the state universities also in each of these. And you will have representation from INIs. In fact, it is in the new system, it is much more a round-table, cooperative, collaborative system rather than a top-down system. So therefore, whenever new regulations or guidelines are formulated, the inputs of the state governments and the state universities are also taken into account. And this membership of the states and the state universities is by rotation. So every few years, new states, new universities will get representation. But on special occasions, where a particular discipline is a very specialized discipline, or it concerns a particular state, those states or state universities can actually be invited as special invitees and take their inputs also. Right. So therefore, right from the beginning of the formulation of the regulations and frameworks, everybody input is taken, and in a collaborative way, these regulations will be formulated.
So is this how academic freedom in terms of curriculum design will also be ensured?
You see, NEP 2020 very clearly says that the regulatory system has to give only broad guidelines. And within those broad guidelines, the institutions have to innovate and design better and better programs. So therefore, the institutions will have full freedom in terms of offering multidisciplinary programs, in terms of offering programs in emerging areas. There will be no day-to-day interference, there will be no micromanagement. The institutions themselves will become accountable, and they will have enough autonomy to experiment and innovate within their own systems.
Professor, how does this pan out, keeping funding and regulation separate? Should, like, I believe the system now keeps it separate, right? So should it be separate?
See, first of all, let us look at the first aspect. The first aspect is taking out the different functions of these regulators, categorizing them into regulation, accreditation, and standard setting, and separating them as independent bodies itself will help our higher education system from all kinds of duplication, conflicts, and delays. And then keeping away the funding aspect from the regulator will actually again avoid any kind of conflict of interest. And this is generally a global practice. If you look at the higher education literature and research, generally it is recommended that funding arm should be kept away from the regulatory bodies so that the regulation and the standard setting becomes more objective and no subjectivity will creep into our processes.
Professor, there is also much hue and cry about the nomenclature, the name of the bill. It was earlier the Higher Education Commission of India, and now it's the Viksit Bharat Shiksha Adhishthan. So the opposition MPs, especially from the Congress and from Tamil Nadu, are raising concerns about the name of the bill because the title is in Hindi. Now, before you tell me, I assume you're going to say the word Bharat is in the title of the bill, which encompasses our country. But
and then Vikasit.
yes.
Vikasit also is related to the common word that we use, Vikas, for progress and development. In Telugu and in some other Indian, South Indian languages also, Vikasam is related to Vikasit. So everybody is familiar with the word Vikasit. That is one aspect. And then Shiksha. Shiksha also is very commonly known word across the country. And then
The major concern is that Hindi is not the primary language in most states of our country.
what I am saying is that if I say Shiksha, it is not that nobody can understand that word. People will in general understand. Besides that, um, you know, we have a rich language culture in our country. We have so many languages spoken by the people. And then it has a common connection also, irrespective of whether they are languages spoken in South or in North or Northeast. There is a common thread also among these languages, right? And don't you think as Indians we should take pride in our own languages and then promote these languages? When NEP 2020 says that our education should be based on Indian ethos, it should have Indian context, I think naming this new organization as Viksit Bharat Shiksha Adhishthan is I am proud about it. It projects our Indianness in the organization. Yeah.
Professor, last question to you now. What sort of challenges do you see in the implementation of absorbing these four regulators into one? What are the possible challenges that may come about into becoming from a four-body thing to a one single umbrella?
You see, this is amalgamation of three different organizations. COA will continue to function. Only its regulatory aspect will be brought under regulatory council. So the system will see at the available resources, the available office space that is available, and then reorganize the entire, these three organizations so that the VBSA can be established. But beyond that, that is an administrative aspect of that. From a regulatory perspective, because last 2-3 years we have been meeting hundreds of vice chancellors in the context of implementing NEP 2020, and this is one regulation the entire higher education system is looking forward to come into practice.
What challenges do you foresee in making that amalgamation?
Um, you see, there will be a transition period because most of the regulations and guidelines they are now already being implemented. So to move to a system, a 3 months to 6 months transition period will be there, and we will be hand-holding. The system will hand-hold the educational institutions. There will be seminars, there will be workshops to bring more awareness. And then there is going to be a lot of technology integration in the new system. For example, the VBSA bill very categorically says that you will have only one digital portal maintained by the regulatory council. And all the educational institutions, instead of submitting their data to multiple agencies, they will submit only on this portal. So that way, a lot of their paperwork will come down. The time the faculty members are using to collect the data and submit can actually be used for improving the pedagogical approaches, improving the research ecosystem. That is one aspect. The other one is that, as I said, one of the major objectives of the regulation of higher education is to protect the interests of the students. For example, today, many young students, they undergo all kinds of anxieties, stress, and so on. They have certain grievances. Now, it becomes our responsibility to make sure that their grievances are addressed in the shortest time possible. So therefore, the VBSA bill very clearly says every educational institution should have a student grievance redressal system. And one more important thing, the student feedback also is a major component, an important component in assessing the educational institutions. Because ultimately, students are our main stakeholders in education, and students are our future of our country. And when you have this digital platform, when educational institutions have to mandatorily update the kind of programs they are offering, the infrastructure they have, the student wellness programs that they are implementing, and more importantly, the audited accounts of all their finances, everything has to be uploaded there. Now, it is available for the public to scrutinize, students can scrutinize, and various agencies which want to rate these institutions can actually pick up the data from here. So it makes the educational institutions more accountable, more responsible towards their students. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, Professor. Thank you for speaking to NDTV. So that was Professor Jagdish Kumar, former chairman of the UGC, speaking to us in length about the new Shiksha bill, new higher education bill that looks to reform higher education's, their ways of functioning, and how the three major bodies, regulatory bodies, are going to be absorbed into a single regulator. The bill has been sent for further scrutiny and discussion to the Joint Parliamentary Committee. This would be a 31-member committee that would be going over the bill and give out the suggestions about it as well. And the timeline for this is until the end of February to get back with, of course, a further plan of action with respect to this new draft bill. With camera person Arun Negi, this is Tanushka Datta for NDTV.